guys. We are on part 3 of Now We Are 6. Um, get comfy and let's get started. The first poem is called The Old Sailor. There was once an old sailor my grandfather knew, who had so many things which he wanted to do, that whenever he thought it was time to begin, he couldn't because of the state he was in. He was shipwrecked and lived on an island for weeks. And he wanted a hat, and he wanted some breeks, and he wanted some nets or a line and some hooks for the turtles and things which you read of in books. And thinking of this, he remembered a thing which he wanted for water, and that was a spring. And he thought that to talk to he'd look for and keep, if he found it, a goat or some chickens and sheep. Then, because of the weather, he wanted a hut with a door to come in by, which opened and shut, with a jerk, which was useful if snakes were about, and a very strong lock to keep savages out. He began on the fish hooks, and when he'd begun, he decided he couldn't because of the sun. So he knew what he ought to begin with, and that was to find or to make a large sun-stopping hat. He was making the hat with some leaves from a tree, when he thought, I'm as hot as a body can be, and I've nothing to take for my terrible thirst, so I'll look for a spring. I'll look for it first. Then he thought as he started, oh dear and oh dear, I'll be lonely tomorrow with nobody here. So he made in his notebook a couple of notes. I must first find some chickens, goats. He had just seen a goat, which he knew by the shape, when he thought, but I must have a boat for escape. But a boat means a sail, which means needles and thread, so I'd better sit down and make needles instead. He began on a needle, but thought as he worked that if this was an island where savages lurked, sitting safe in his hut he'd have nothing to fear, whereas now they might suddenly breathe in his ear. So he thought of his hut, and he thought of his boat, and his hat, and his breeks, and his chickens and goat, and the hooks for his food, and the spring for his thirst, but he never could think which he ought to do first. And so in the end he did nothing at all, but basked on the shingle wrapped up in a shawl, and I think it was dreadful the way he behaved. He did nothing but basking until he was saved. The Engineer. Let it rain, who cares? I've a train upstairs, with a brake which I make from a string sort of thing, which works in jerks, 'cause it drops in a spring, which stops with the string. And the wheels all stick so quick that it feels like a thing that you make with a brake, not string. So that's what I make when the day's all wet. It's a good sort of brake, but it hasn't worked yet. Journey's End. Christopher, Christopher, where are you going? Christopher Robin. Just up to the top of the hill, upping and upping until I am right on the top of the hill, said Christopher Robin. Christopher, Christopher, why are you going? Christopher Robin. There's nothing to see, so when you've got to the top, what then? Just down to the bottom again, said Christopher Robin. Furry Bear. If I were a bear, and a big bear too, I shouldn't much care if it froze or snew. I shouldn't much mind if it snowed or frizzed. I'd be all fur-lined with a coat like his. For I'd have fur boots and a brown fur trap, and brown fur knickers and a big fur cap. And I'd have a fur muffle ruff to cover my jaws, and brown fur mittens on my big brown paws. with a big brown furry down up to my head. I'd sleep all the winter on a big fur bed. Forgiven. I found a little beetle, so that beetle was his name, and I called him Alexander, and he answered just the same. I put him in a matchbox, and I kept him all the day, and Nanny let my beetle out. Yes, Nanny let my beetle out. She went and let my beetle out, and Beetle ran away. She said she didn't mean it, and I never said she did. She said she wanted matches, and she just took off the lid. She said that she was sorry, but it's difficult to catch an excited sort of beetle you've mistaken for a match. She said that she was sorry, and I really mustn't mind, and there's lots and lots of beetles which she's certain we could find. If we looked about the garden for the holes where beetles hid, and we get another matchbox and write beetle on the lid. We went to all the places which a beetle might be near, and we made the sort of noises which a beetle likes to hear. And I saw a kind of something, and I gave a sort of shout. A beetle house, an Alexander Beetle coming out. It was Alexander Beetle, I'm as certain as can be, and he had a sort of look as if he thought it must be me. And he had a sort of look as if he thought he ought to say, I'm very, very sorry that I tried to run away. And Nanny's very sorry, too, for you know what she did. And she's writing Alexander very blackly on the lid. So Nan and me are friends, because it's difficult to catch an excited Alexander you've mistaken for a match. The Emperor's Rhyme. The King of Peru, who was emperor too, had a sort of a rhyme, which was useful to know. If he felt very shy when a stranger came by, or they asked him the time when his watch didn't go, or supposing he fell, by mistake, down a well, or he tumbled when skating and sat on his hat, or perhaps wasn't told till his porridge was cold that his breakfast was waiting, or something like that. Oh, whenever the emperor got into a temper, or felt himself sulky or sad, he would murmur and murmur until he felt firmer this curious rhyme which he had. 8 eights are 64, multiply by 7. When it's done, carry 1 and take away 11. 9 nines are 81, multiply by 3. If it's more, carry 4, and then it's time for tea. So whenever the queen took his armor to clean, and she didn't remember to use any starch, or his birthday in May was a horrible day, being wet as November and windy as March, or if sitting in state with the wise and the great, he just happened to hiccup while signing his name, or the queen gave a cough when his crown tumbled off as he bent down to pick up a pen for the same. Oh, whenever the emperor got into a temper or felt himself awkward and shy, he would whisper and whisper until he felt crisper this odd little rhyme to the sky. 8 eights are 81, multiply by 7. If it's more, carry 4 and take away 11. 9 nines are 64, multiply by 3. When it's done, carry 1, and then it's time for tea. Knight in armor. Whenever I'm a shining knight, I buckle on my armor tight, and then I look about for things, like rushings out and rescuings, and savings from the dragon's lair, and fighting all the dragons there. And sometimes when our fights begin, I think I'll let the dragons win, and then I think perhaps I won't, because they're dragons, and I don't. Come out with me. There's sun on the river and sun on the hill. You can hear the sea if you stand quite still. There's 8 new puppies at Roundabout Farm, and I saw an old sailor with only 1 arm. But everyone says, run along, run along, run along. All of them say, run along, I'm busy as can be. Everyone says, run along. there's a little darling. If I'm a little darling, why don't they run with me? There's wind on the river and wind on the hill. There's a dark dead water wheel under the mill. I saw a fly which had just been drowned, and I know where a rabbit goes into the ground. But everyone says, run along, run along, run along. All of them say, yes, dear, and never notice me. Everyone says, run along, there's a little darling. If I'm a little darling, why won't they come and see? Down by the pond. I'm fishing. Don't talk, anybody, don't come near. Can't you see that the fish might hear? He thinks I'm playing with a piece of string. He thinks I'm another sort of funny sort of thing. But he doesn't know I'm fishing. He doesn't know I'm fishing. That's what I'm doing, fishing. No, I'm not. I'm newting. Don't cough, anybody, don't come by. Any small noise makes a newt feel shy. He thinks I'm a bush or a new sort of tree. He thinks it's somebody, but doesn't think it's me. And he doesn't know I'm newting. No, he doesn't know I'm newting. That's what I'm doing, newting. Okay, guys, we're going to stop there. I really love that Christopher Robin is always finding something to do. He's always using his imagination and his toys or his friends and finding something to play with. So let's write about what you like to play with today. It's almost the end of May, so we only have a couple more days where I'm going to write May at the top of my paper, and then we'll be in the month of June. What do you like to play? What do you like to play? Okay, guys, thanks for listening.